Hello guys, today I'm testing Starfield on the ROG Ally. The game is playable on the Ally even at 1080p. Let's dive right into it. So, into the cosmos with Starfield on the ROG Ally. Kicking things off with the low preset at 720p in performance mode. Now, I've discovered this intriguing space station. This space structure should add some load so that we can get a good idea of the performance. After navigating my way around this behemoth, I clocked an average of 38 FPS. Not bad, right? Time to ramp up the stakes. Let's switch our location and jump into some interior action. So we have Karen here following us, and let's move around a bit to get a rough idea about the FPS range. We're getting over 60 FPS on occasions, but the average seems to be around 55 FPS. Ready for some combat? Let's see how much our frame rate might take a hit. Well, it's not that bad. We went from around 55 FPS to like 45 FPS when we fight some enemies. Thanks to VRR, it feels just as buttery as a smooth 60 FPS. Time to get some lunar love. Off to the moon with our trusty sidekick Karen. Give a wave to the audience, Karen. Well, never mind. With that poker face, she could give the nearby stone a run for its money. But hey, it's all about the journey, right, Karen? Alright, so as long as I'm not facing the facility over there, the FPS are pretty similar to what we had during indoor action. That is, an average of 43-ish FPS. But as soon as we face this thing, we get like a 10 FPS drop. Inside this mysterious site, we're actually getting below 30 FPS at moments. Well, the game is playable using the low preset, but I think that the medium preset is going to have a hard time when exploring planets. Okay guys, now I'm on the moon using the medium preset at 720p and using the Ally's performance mode. We have Karen here with us again. You okay, Karen? I think you have something on your face. Let me... There you go. Well, let's roam a bit around here to get a feel for the FPS. A few jumps, Karen chasing us, and we're getting around 34 FPS on average. And we haven't gotten into the bandit layer yet, but yeah. Once we get inside, we can see the FPS tank to 26 average FPS. It's still playable though, but I think you'd be better off just using the low preset. Time to get our ship and fly around our favorite space station of the day. Let me tell you this guys, the average FPS is now around 30 FPS, but the game looks the same as when I was using the low preset. I just can't seem to find a reason to use the medium preset, to be honest. At least not when the Ally is on the performance mode. But anyways, let's move on to some indoor gameplay. Well, this is actually not bad at all. We're getting over 36 FPS during combat, which is still really enjoyable. Where are you? Come out. Okay, it's time to move on to 1080p. I'm going to start with some of this indoor action so we can compare it to the FPS we had just a moment ago. And well guys, the FPS readings are a bit strange. We're now getting both better and worse FPS when compared to 720p on the medium preset. The range is from 30 up to 40 FPS during combat. Hey Karen, get out the way. So it's less stable. But hey, this is 1080p right here, so no complaints. Now on to space travel. Let's return to the outer space facility and see the performance there. Here we are experiencing 1080p space glory, running smoothly enough for enjoyable gameplay. I spent the last 20 minutes, not really playing, but flying through these gaps. And the average FPS I recorded was 34 FPS, and it never dipped below 30. And what about playing on the moon? Well, here I am, jumping around the moon. This is Earth's moon, by the way, not just some random moon. And, well, the FPS stays above 30, I must say, but when we look towards the facility, we can see some dips below 30. So once we start fighting these guys, I think the FPS might drop lower than what we saw on the medium preset at 720p. You good, Karen? Okay guys, now with some action on the screen, I must admit I was expecting lower frame rates. However, the average FPS is holding up pretty well. We do see occasional dips below 30, but the game performs better at 1080p low than at 720p medium. Remember, this is at 15 watts. Once we increase the power, we're definitely going to see some improvements here. Now let's ramp up the power guys. I'm setting the Ally's power manually to 18 watts, and we'll see how the game performs. I'll use the low preset just like before, so the only change is the power setting. Let's start on the moon for a direct comparison. With just 3 more watts of power, we've seen a noticeable boost in performance. The average FPS when moving around here is now 37 FPS, even when we're in combat. The average holds at 32 FPS, with occasional dips to 30 FPS. As far as I can tell, it never goes below 30 FPS. Time for indoor performance, and wow guys, consistently above 40 FPS at 1080p. This is fantastic. Karen, either do something or step aside. The average FPS after playing for a while was 45 FPS during action-packed moments. When I was just wandering around indoors, the average was 55 FPS, occasionally spiking up to 60 FPS. Now, for space, we're seeing over 40 FPS here too. So, at 18 watts, I'd say that Starfield is perfectly playable at 1080p on the Ally. No doubts about it. I'm impressed with the performance so far. Alright guys, let's switch gears and reduce the resolution to 720p. Will we achieve that buttery smooth 60 FPS at 720p? Let's find out. So, here's our outer space structure. Let's navigate around it for a bit. Just a heads up, I'm using the low preset at 720p and have manually set the Ally to 18 watts. The average FPS I'm recording is 42 FPS and I was hoping for a more significant jump in performance, especially considering we were getting around 40 FPS at 1080p. So dropping the resolution from 1080p to 720p only gives us a 5% performance boost. Something seems off. Maybe there's a bottleneck somewhere, not sure. Now, let's hop around on the moon and see if our performance is better than at 1080p. Okay, this is where we're seeing a more noticeable improvement. At 1080p, our average was 37 FPS, but now it's exceeding 48 FPS. Even when we focus on this bandit facility, the rate stays above 40 FPS. Let's dive into some action, and you can see the frame rate remains pretty good, hovering around 40 FPS while battling these robots. Given these figures, I'm eager to check out the indoor performance. So inside, the FPS counter tells the story. We're past 60 FPS. Of course, that might dip a bit during combat, but these are still very good numbers. And check it out. While taking on these enemies here, the average seems to hover around 55 FPS. It feels incredibly smooth on the Ally screen. I could play with these settings all day. But what would happen if we crank up the graphics preset to medium? Let's check it out. Alright guys, let's break it down. We're at 720p medium settings and running at 18 watts. Moving through this empty corridor, I'm clocking in at 50 FPS. But honestly, I can't really see a significant improvement in graphics quality to justify the drop in performance. Is it just me, or can you all spot any difference? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the video, hit that thumbs up. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed yet, well, you know what to do, right? And back to the game. We're now facing off against these pirates, or whatever they are, and the FPS holds up pretty well. A steady 40 FPS is pretty impressive. However, I'm a bit concerned about the game's performance in outdoor scenes and during space travel, since indoor environments tend to be the least resource intensive. So let's move on into space and see how the game holds up. Just why is space travel so taxing in this game? Visually, it doesn't seem that extraordinary, but for some reason, space segments give us the lowest FPS readings. Right now we're averaging 33 FPS, while on the low preset it was around 42 FPS. That's a big drop of nearly 10 FPS just by switching to medium settings. To me, the trade-off doesn't seem worth it. But let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Time to land on the moon and check the performance there. Here we are on the moon's surface. Even from a distance away from the action, the performance doesn't feel optimized. I'm recording an average of about 36 FPS as I hop around. Approaching the enemy base, the FPS dips close to 30. My advice? Skip the medium settings. You'll probably have a smoother experience using the low preset at 1080p if that's what you're into. Alright guys, I don't want to drag out this video, so I'll test Starfield at 720p using the low preset in the Ally's turbo mode. If you're curious about my other 25 watt test, check out my website. I've uploaded all the individual clips, tables, and charts detailing the performance across all tested power and graphics settings. I've included the link in the description below. So, at 25 watts, 720p and low settings, we should be squeezing the absolute best FPS out of the Ally. Starting with the moon scenario, just hopping around and moving gives us an average of 55 FPS. It's so close to 60 FPS, but honestly, on the Ally screen, distinguishing between 55 FPS and 60 FPS is challenging. At 18 watts, it was 48 FPS, so 55 FPS is a noticeable improvement. However, when we engage with enemies, the average FPS drops to around 41, which is similar to the 18 watt result. And indoors, we occasionally hit 70 FPS. However, when moving with no enemies in sight, the average FPS is around 65. Compared to the 60 FPS we got at 18 watts, that's about a 10% performance boost. Here I am battling these enemies alongside Karen, and the performance is fantastic. All these on-screen effects, and we're still clocking around 57 FPS, but it spikes to roughly 60 FPS during calmer moments. Now, let's switch scenes and pilot our spaceship. This is impressive. I'm seeing an average of 49 FPS, even though it's currently hovering around 45 FPS. To wrap up this section, at 25 watts we're achieving a performance level with the Ally that I thought was unattainable. Overall, Starfield runs beautifully on the Ally. At 15 watts you'll still have a solid gaming experience, just avoid 1080p. For 1080p gameplay, you'll need at least 18 watts and ideally the Ally's turbo mode. Also, I'd advise skipping the medium graphics preset. The performance hit from switching from low to medium is more significant than shifting from 720p to 1080p. As for battery life, it's pretty consistent with other games. 1 hour and 40 minutes at 15 watts. At 18 watts, this drops to 1 hour and 20 minutes, and if you activate the Ally's turbo mode, you should expect to get around an hour of gameplay. That's a wrap for today. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And remember, I've added a link to my website in the description where you'll find all the data, tables, and charts. If you could leave a comment with feedback, I'd appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.